The first time I saw her clearly, she was standing in my mirror wearing my fear like silk, and I swear my whole body forgot how to breathe. I had one hand on the bedroom light switch, one hand shaking over a cheap lipstick tube I had hidden inside an old sock, and in that exact second I understood something terrifying. If I turned the light off and walked away again, I would spend the rest of my life pretending I was almost alive. And what made it worse was that by the end of that same night, my secret would come closer to being exposed than ever before because the box under my bed was no longer enough, the excuses in my mouth were no longer enough, and the version of me everyone called normal had started cracking so badly that even I could see the light coming through. I wish I could tell you it started with confidence, but it started with hunger. Not the kind for food. The kind that sits behind your ribs when you spend years admiring softness from a distance and telling yourself you are only curious, only joking, only experimenting, only relieving stress, only passing time, only doing anything except telling the truth. I had become a master at renaming my own longing. I called it fashion interest. I called it private play. I called it inspiration. I called it a weird phase that somehow lasted from childhood into adulthood. But the truth was simpler and harder. I loved what happened to me when I slipped into feminine expression. I loved the stillness that came over my mind. I loved how my shoulders relaxed. I loved how carefully I moved. I loved how the noise in my head went quiet long enough for me to hear myself. The first thing I ever wore in secret was not a dress. It was a scarf. My cousin had left it behind after a family gathering, pale pink with tiny silver threads that caught light when I held it up. I must have been 11. I locked myself in the bathroom, wrapped it around my neck, and stared into the mirror as if I had just met someone important. I remember thinking, not that I looked pretty, but that I looked possible. That feeling scared me more than anything. I took it off so fast I nearly tore it. Then I spent the rest of the day acting louder than usual, rougher than usual, as if noise could erase softness. That became my pattern for years. Touch beauty in secret. Panic. Overcorrect. Repeat. By the time I was old enough to buy my own things, I had built a whole hidden world out of caution. One t-shirt in a softer cut. One pair of tights buried inside winter clothes nobody touched. A drugstore eyeliner. A wig so cheap it looked like it had survived a storm, but I loved it anyway because it meant I no longer had to imagine everything. If you have ever started this journey quietly, you know the strange brilliance of tiny steps. The world thinks transformation begins with a full look, but it usually begins with details. A fabric that drapes instead of clings. A neckline that changes your posture. A shade of lip color that makes you stop seeing a costume and start seeing a mood. Most people outside this world never understand that. They think crossdressing is about shock. For many of us, it is about recognition. That night, the night everything shifted, I had decided I was done doing half of it. Not because I was brave, because I was exhausted. I had spent 6 days working, smiling, answering messages, making jokes, doing errands, and pretending the box under my bed did not hum like a second heartbeat. So I came home, locked my bedroom door, pulled the curtains shut, and laid everything out carefully on the bed like ritual objects. A black skater skirt, sheer tights, a cream sweater that fell off one shoulder just enough to make me nervous. A better wig than my first one, dark brown with soft waves. A tiny makeup pouch with products I had spent months learning to use badly before I learned to use them well. Nobody talks enough about how much patience crossdressing teaches you when you truly want to improve. Not for the camera. Not for a joke. Not for a party. For yourself. I learned that foundation is less about hiding and more about evening. That if your color match is wrong, no confidence can save it. That blending in natural light tells the truth. Your bedroom bulb never will. That brows change of face faster than expensive clothes do. That posture matters more than people think. The moment I stopped trying to stomp around in a body I resented and started moving with intention, everything changed. Even alone in my room, I could feel it. Soft knees. Longer breaths. Shoulders dropped. Chin calm, not forced. It was not about becoming someone fake. It was about allowing parts of me to stop hiding. I pulled the tights on first, then the skirt, then the sweater. My hands were unsteady, but not from shame this time. From anticipation. The wig cap flattened my hair. The wig settled around my face. I adjusted the front, tugged it slightly lower, angled the part, stepped back, and felt that strange electric silence that comes when something internal finally appears outside of you. Then I did my makeup slowly. Primer, corrector, foundation, concealer only where needed, a light contour, because heavy contour had betrayed me too many times. Soft blush higher on the cheek, mascara, a muted rose lip. I was not trying to look like a fantasy. I was trying to look believable enough that I would stop arguing with my own reflection. When I finally looked up, I did not see perfection. I saw effort. I saw tenderness. I saw mistakes. I saw a jawline I was still learning to soften with angles and shadow. I saw hands that looked too tense because I was clenching them. I saw the little asymmetry in my liner. But underneath all that, I saw something larger. I saw relief. It hit me so hard I had to sit down. I actually laughed, then cried, then laughed again because I sounded ridiculous doing both in a wig and lipstick. But it was real. After years of sneaking glances at some future version of me, their eye was not finished, not flawless, but visible. And, of course, that was the exact moment my brother started pounding on my bedroom door. He never knocked softly. "Why is your door locked?" he shouted. "Mom said come eat." My whole body went cold. That rush of panic is something only people with secrets like this understand. It is not normal fear. It is a full-body evacuation. Every thought turns into one command at once.
Hide.
Remove.
Wipe. Change. Breathe. Lie.
I yanked the wig off so fast it snagged. I wiped my lips with the sleeve of my sweater and made it worse. I kicked the skirt under the bed, pulled on sweatpants over tights, and shouted back that I had spilled something and needed a minute. He laughed and said I was weird. The doorknob rattled once, hard enough to make my heart slam. Then his footsteps moved away. I stood there shaking, staring at myself in the mirror with one false lash half lifting and lipstick smeared into a wounded-looking blur. That should have sent me back into hiding for months.
It used to.
But something had changed. Instead of feeling disgusted, I felt angry. Not at him. At fear. At how quickly fear had trained me to destroy myself. I remember looking straight at the mirror and saying out loud, "No, not this time." So I locked the door again, cleaned my face, fixed the wig, redid the lip, and finished the look. That was the first turning point that really mattered. I did not just dress. I recovered. I refused to let interruption become erasure. After dinner, I waited until the house grew quiet again. Then I dressed a second time, but with more care, more patience, and something new under my skin. Defiance. I took photos, not many, just enough to capture the evidence that I had been real that night. Then I made a private folder on my phone and named it Visible. That name would come back and change my life later, but in that moment, it was only a small rebellion. Proof for the version of me that would wake up tomorrow and try to minimize everything. Proof that I had not imagined the peace I felt. The next week I became obsessed, but in a healthier way than before. Not reckless, not spending money I did not have, not chasing impossible beauty standards.
Studying.
Learning. Improving. I measured myself properly instead of guessing sizes, and ending up discouraged. That alone changed everything. If you are learning, please believe me on this. Size labels mean almost nothing across brands. Measurements are truth. Shoulders, chest, waist, hips, inseam. Write them down.
Save them.
It saves money, frustration, and that awful moment when a gorgeous piece arrives and punishes you for trusting a random number. I also learned to stop buying only what looked dramatic online. Some of the most affirming things I ever wore were simple. A fitted cardigan, a soft lounge set, a high-waisted skirt that moved when I walked. You do not need a costume to feel transformed. Sometimes you need clothes that let your nervous system unclench. During that same week, I made the second dangerous decision of my life. The first had been letting myself become visible. The second was reaching out to someone. Online, of course. I had followed a small account for months, A crossdresser a little older than me who always wrote about style, confidence, and self-respect instead of just posting filtered selfies and disappearing. One night, I sent a message I nearly deleted 10 times.
Hi.
This is awkward, but I think I'm finally trying to take this part of myself seriously, and I don't know how to stop feeling like a fraud. I expected no response. What I got back 3 hours later changed me more than any makeup tutorial ever could. Frauds don't ache for honesty, she wrote. They perform. If you're scared, you're probably close to something real. Her name was Mara, or at least that was the name she used with me, and she became the first person to talk to me about crossdressing as a craft of care rather than a secret addiction. She told me to stop asking whether I had earned femininity and start asking what made me feel calm, elegant, safe, and authentic. She told me not to compare my day 1 face to someone else's year 5 face. She told me cheap wigs can still look beautiful if you shape them, de-angle them gently, and stop expecting them to behave like human hair. She told me flat shoes are not a failure. She told me voice is optional and presence is everything. She told me the goal is not to pass every test strangers invent. The goal is to become less breakable in your own reflection. For the first time, I had language for what I was doing. I was not just hiding. I was building. That distinction matters. Hiding assumes shame. Building assumes future. So I built. I practiced my walk in the hallway when everyone was asleep, learning that smaller steps and relaxed hips looked better than exaggerated movement. I experimented with necklines because they changed how I saw my shoulders. I discovered that a simple necklace could redirect the eye better than panicked contouring. I learned to sit down in a skirt without making it look like I was lowering a sack of groceries. I learned that shaving in a rush only leads to regret, and that skincare is not optional if you want your makeup to stop fighting you. Every little lesson made me less desperate. And the less desperate I became, the more beautiful I looked, because desperation always shows. Confidence does too. Then came the comment that nearly broke me. I had taken one photo I actually loved. Nothing wild. Just me in a soft lavender top, subtle makeup, the wig finally behaving, had turned slightly so the light kissed my cheekbone in a way that made me feel almost cinematic. I sent it to Mara. She told me it was the first photo where I looked unafraid. That meant more to me than being called pretty. So in a rush of adrenaline, I did something stupid and tiny and enormous at once. I made a new anonymous account and posted the picture for strangers. The first few comments were kind. Elegant. Cute look. Love the soft styling. I stared at them like someone starving over crumbs. Then one comment appeared and seemed to swallow every other word on the screen. No matter what you wear, you'll always just look like a man playing pretend. I read it once.
Twice.
15 times. It was not original. It was not even particularly cruel by internet standards. But it hit the exact wound I had spent years protecting. My chest tightened. My ears rang. And within an hour, I had deleted the post, deactivated the account, and taken every item from my secret box out onto the floor. If you know this world, you know what came next. The purge. I held the skirt in one hand and told myself I was being mature. I held the wig and called myself practical. I lined up the makeup products and acted as if throwing them away would make me clean, disciplined, normal. But the truth is, purging almost never comes from clarity. It comes from pain pretending to be wisdom. I stuffed everything into a trash bag, tied it twice, and carried it to the back door. My hand was on the handle when my phone buzzed. A message from Mara.
Hey.
Don't disappear because one coward wanted you small. I froze. Then another message. Before you do anything dramatic, tell me exactly what you're feeling. I sat on the kitchen floor at 2 a.m. and told a stranger the truth. That I felt stupid.
Exposed.
Delusional. That I was terrified. She had all been in my head. Mara responded with something I have never forgotten. If one insult can erase you, then you didn't need less femininity. You needed stronger roots. I cried so hard I laughed at myself again. Then I untied the bag. That was another turning point. Not because I kept the clothes. Because I understood that shame always tries to dress up as reason. It always sounds sensible when it wants you gone. For 2 months after that, I stopped trying to impress imaginary audiences and focused on becoming consistent. No dramatic posting. No midnight spirals. Just routine. Better lighting. Better grooming. Better fit. Better self-talk. I made rules for myself. Never judge a look before finishing hair and accessories. Never buy a piece just because it looks good on a model with a completely different frame. Never punish myself for not looking like a fantasy. Never rush an outfit if the goal is comfort. Most important, never let strangers define whether my joy is ridiculous. Those rules did more for me than confidence quotes ever could. And then my mother found a lipstick stain on one of my mugs. I wish I were exaggerating. I had gotten careless after a late-night session and forgotten to wash a cup I had used while fully dressed. The next morning she held it at breakfast and frowned. "Whose is this?" she asked. It was one of those small household moments that should mean nothing, but suddenly means everything. My brother joked that I had a secret girlfriend. I nearly choked on toast. My mother looked at me for half a second too long. I looked
Away.
She said nothing else, but something in her eyes changed. For 3 days, I lived in a state of silent collapse. Every sound outside my door felt loaded. Every casual question sounded like a trap. I started moving things around my room, checking hiding places, panicking at shadows. Then on the 4th day, I came home from work and knew before I opened the door that something was wrong. My room looked normal, but too normal, the way a space looks when someone has tried to put it back exactly as they found it. The box under my bed was half an inch out of place. I sat down on the edge of the mattress and felt the blood leave my hands. There are moments in life where time becomes physical, heavy, visible. I waited all evening for my mother to say something. She did not. She cooked dinner, asked if I wanted tea, told my brother to stop chewing so loudly. Ordinary. Perfectly ordinary. It would have been easier if she had screamed. Silence gave my imagination room to become monstrous. By midnight, I could not take it anymore. I went to the kitchen, found her reading at the table, and asked, "Did you go in my room?" She looked up slowly, closed the book, and for 3 seconds I became a child again. "Yes," she said. That single word ripped the floor out from under me. I expected disgust.
Shock.
Questions fired like bullets. Instead, she looked tired, almost sad, and said, "I moved some laundry and saw things I don't think were meant for me." I opened my mouth and nothing came out. She studied my face with a softness that somehow made it harder, not easier. Finally, she asked, very gently, "How long have you been carrying this alone?" I broke. There is no elegant way to describe what happens when a secret outgrows your body all at once. I cried in the kitchen like someone had cut a wire holding me upright for years. I kept saying I was sorry, and she kept telling me to sit down. I told her it wasn't what she thought, then admitted I didn't even know what I thought, then confessed I did know, at least enough to know it mattered, and had mattered for a very long time. I told her I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I told her I wasn't doing it for laughs. I told her it was the only time I felt close to myself in a way I didn't know how to explain. She listened without interrupting, which was almost unbearable. Then she said the sentence that became another turning point in my life. "I think I knew you were fighting something tender. Not broken. Not wrong. Tender." I stared at her as if she had spoken a secret language from my dreams. She told me she had noticed small things over the years. How I lingered near fabrics in stores. How I borrowed softness without naming it. How I looked both happier and more frightened after being alone too long. She said she never wanted to push me into confession because shame makes people disappear faster, and she would rather wait than lose me. I asked if she was angry. She shook her head. "I'm sad you were so scared," she said. "And I'm worried because the world can be cruel. But angry?
No."
I had imagined exposure 1,000 times, and in none of those fantasies did acceptance arrive quietly at a kitchen table with tea going cold between us. That night she asked one more question. "Do you want me to pretend I know nothing, or do you want me to help you?" I thought my heart would burst. Help felt too large, too impossible. But I whispered yes anyway. The next Saturday, she knocked on my door carrying a small paper bag and a face so careful I almost laughed. "If this is overstepping, tell me immediately," she said. Inside the bag was a better makeup sponge, a gentle cleanser, and a peach-toned corrector. "You've been using too much orange," she said, avoiding my eyes. I just stared. Then I laughed so hard I started crying again. That was the first time we spoke about my cross-dressing in daylight. What followed was not instant perfection or a montage where everything became easy. It was awkward, beautiful, and painfully human. She taught me how to steam wrinkles out of delicate fabric without scorching it. She showed me how posture changes an outfit. She told me that if I was going to wear a necklace, it needed a purpose, not just panic sparkle. She helped me understand proportions in a way shopping websites never had. "If the top is soft and loose, define somewhere else," she would say. "If the skirt moves, let the rest breathe." These were clothing lessons, yes, but they felt deeper. She was teaching me how to stop hiding under my own choices. And then she made the boldest suggestion yet. "You can't build confidence only in this room," she said. "At some point, if you want peace, you have to let your feet touch the world." No sentence had ever thrilled and terrified me more. Going outside for the first time was not a glamorous fantasy. It was logistics, nerves, and a survival plan. We chose a weekday evening. A quiet shopping area, one neighborhood over, where nobody knew me. I wore a simple navy dress, black flats, a long beige coat, and very soft makeup. Nothing loud, nothing desperate, just enough that if someone looked, they would see intention. My mother insisted on practical things I now recommend to anyone doing this for the first time. Charged phone, cash and card, backup flats even if you think you do not need them, keys accessible without digging, a place planned in advance. No aimless wandering while panicked. "Confidence is not pretending danger isn't real," she said. "It's reducing what you can." When I stepped out of the car, my knees nearly gave up. The air felt too exposed, the pavement too bright, every sound too sharp. I was sure everyone could see through me instantly. But then something astonishing happened. People kept living. A woman walked past carrying takeout and barely glanced at me. A teenage couple argued over ice cream flavors. A man locked his bike. The world did not explode because I existed in it. My fear had spent years telling me visibility would be catastrophic. Reality was less dramatic and far more healing. I was not the center of every gaze. I was just another person trying to move through an evening. We went into a small cafe. I ordered tea. My voice shook on the first word and steadied on the second. The cashier smiled and handed me the receipt without incident. I still remember the texture of that paper in my hand because it felt like evidence from another universe. I sat by the window, heart racing, and looked at my reflection in the glass layered over the street outside. I was there, in public, still breathing, still whole. Not everyone will understand why that matters so much. But if you do, you really do. Of course, joy rarely arrives without being tested. As we left the cafe, I heard someone say my name. My real, everyday name. The one attached to the version of me I thought I had left home. I turned, and there he was, Daniel, a guy I had gone to school with and had not seen in years. He stared at me, then at my mother, then back at me, and something ugly lit up his face. "No way," he said, loud enough for two people nearby to hear. "Is that you?" My blood turned to ice. My first instinct was to shrink, to look down, to vanish inside my coat. Daniel took one step closer with the kind of grin small men wear when they sense power. "Wow," he said. "This is insane." I do not know what would have happened if my mother had not placed one hand lightly against my back at that exact moment. Not pushing, not shielding, just reminding. I was still here. So I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something that changed the texture of my fear forever. He was enjoying my panic more than he cared about my truth. That meant his power required my collapse. So, I did the one thing he was not ready for. I smiled. "Yes," I said.
Calmly.
"It's me." The grin on his face flickered. People who want you ashamed are often helpless when you refuse the role. He laughed, but weaker now. "Man, this is wild. I kept my voice steady. Maybe, but I'm not embarrassed. Then I turned, took my mother's arm, and walked away with my back straight even though my pulse felt explosive. In the car I shook so badly my lipstick almost touched my teeth. But beneath the panic was something stronger than relief.
Pride.
I had not won because he approved. I had won because I stayed. That moment changed how I understood public fear. Passing is not a magic shield. Approval is not a stable home. The deepest protection I found was not beauty. It was self-loyalty. The decision that even if someone clocked me, mocked me, or stared too long, I would not join them in abandoning myself. That is a harder lesson than eyeliner, but it lasts longer. After that first outing, I did not become fearless. I became practiced. That matters more. I learned which neighborhoods felt easier, which times were calmer, which outfits made me tug nervously, and which let me breathe. I learned that trying too hard to perform femininity made me look less natural, not more. I learned that some days a subtle look gave me more peace than a dramatic one. I learned that confidence grows through repetition, not fantasy. Most of all, I learned that the body remembers safety. The more evenings I spent existing without disaster, the less my nervous system treated visibility like a fire. A few months later, I made another anonymous account, but this time I did it differently. No chasing strangers. No posting for validation. I told stories. Short ones at first. About finding the right shade. About the first time I chose a cardigan over a costume and felt more feminine, not less. About how many of us think we need permission to enjoy softness. The response surprised me. People wrote to me not because I looked perfect, but because I sounded honest. Men older than me, younger than me. People married, single, hidden, out, confused, confident, terrified. So many of them carried the same exhausted secret. They did not just want to dress. They wanted to understand why it mattered so much and how to stop hating themselves for it. That became the next turning point. I stopped thinking of my crossdressing as a private flaw I was managing and started seeing it as a language through which I could connect, comfort, and teach. The more openly I spoke about mistakes, the more people trusted me. I told them not to bankrupt themselves trying to build a perfect closet overnight. I told them good shapewear helps, but self-contempt shows more than any body line ever will. I told them wigs improve when you stop attacking them with brushes and start working in sections. I told them not to let one bad outfit convince them they were not meant for this. I told them feminine energy is not a single silhouette sold by an algorithm. It is attention, softness, play, presence, choice. My small page grew. Not huge. Not yet, but steadily. Messages turned into conversations. Conversations turned into a little community. We shared budget tips, safety tips, shopping disasters, small victories. One person celebrated going outside in nail polish for the first time. Another finally stopped purging after every shame spiral. A third said they cried reading a post where I described feeling possible in the mirror. That word again. Possible. It seemed to follow me everywhere, as if my life had been split into before and after that realization. Then my father found out. If my mother's discovery was a quiet earthquake, my father's was a storm breaking open all at once. He was not cruel by nature, but he believed in simplicity. Men are this. Women are that. Private feelings stay private. Hard things are solved with work and silence. He did not snoop. He was handed the truth, by accident. My brother, who knew less than he thought, mentioned my weird fashion page while passing a phone around after dinner. One wrong click. One saved thumbnail. 1 second of stunned silence. Then my father looked at the screen, looked at me, and the room changed temperature. He did not yell immediately. Somehow that was worse. He just said, "What is this?" No language prepares you for being seen by the person whose approval shaped your spine. I tried to answer carefully.
Failed.
Started again. My mother intervened once, softly, but he raised a hand, not at her, just to keep the air clear. I'm asking him. The word hit me like a stone. Him. Not because it was wrong, but because I suddenly realized how frightened I still was of being trapped inside other people's grammar forever. I told him the truth as simply as I could. That it was not a joke. That it had been part of me for years. That I was not trying to humiliate the family. That I felt more like myself in those moments, not less. He looked at me as if I were speaking from underwater. "Why would you do this to yourself?" he asked. That question split something open in me. Not because it was crueler than insults from strangers. Because it revealed the deepest misunderstanding. He thought this was damage I was inflicting on myself. He could not yet imagine it was relief. I said, quietly but firmly, "I'm not doing it to myself. I'm finally doing something for myself." He left the room. The next week was brutal. Not explosive.
Cold.
He spoke to me only when necessary. My mother moved through the house like someone balancing glass. I almost retreated, completely. The old instinct returned fast. Minimize, disappear, apologize until the shape of you becomes easier for others to swallow. But this time I had too much evidence of myself to go back entirely. I had the mirror, the cafe, the messages from people I had helped. The nights I could finally sleep after dressing because my body felt inhabited instead of rented. So even in the silence, I did not purge. I did not erase the page. I did not beg my way back into invisibility. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. My father knocked on my door. He almost never knocked. I opened it and found him standing there holding a small cardboard box. "This was in the attic," he said. "Your grandmother's." I took it without understanding. Inside were old costume jewelry pieces, a brooch, 2 pairs of clip-on earrings, and a silk scarf folded so neatly it looked ceremonial. I stared up at him, confused. He would not meet my eyes. "She liked dressing up more than anyone I ever knew," he said. "Even when she was cleaning." A pause. "I don't understand you fully." Another pause, harder this time. "But I'm trying not to confuse not understanding with not loving." I do not think I breathed for 5 seconds. That was not a movie speech. It was better. It was real, limited, honest, human. He was not transformed overnight into some perfect ally with rehearsed language. But he had moved. He had chosen movement over distance. For someone like him, that was monumental. I touched the scarf in the box and suddenly remembered the pink one from childhood. The first moment I had looked possible. My whole life folded in on itself. Softness had been calling me for years through different hands, different objects, different forms of permission, and I had spent so long believing I was answering alone. After that, my world widened faster. I started going out more regularly, sometimes alone, sometimes with my mother, sometimes meeting friends from the small community I had built. Nothing wild.
Brunch. Shopping.
Evening walks. A quiet bookstore where the owner complimented my coat, and I rode that one sentence for a week. Every outing gave me information. Which neckline worked best in daylight. How much makeup survived nervous sweating. How much easier it felt when I dressed for harmony instead of shock. How powerful a simple smile could be when I stopped waiting for people to expose me. Then came the invitation that changed everything again. A local LGBTQ community center reached out through my page and asked if I would speak at a small storytelling night about identity, visibility, and self-acceptance. My first instinct was to say no. Public speaking while dressed felt like jumping out of a plane wearing blush. But the second instinct, the quieter and wiser one, asked a question I could not escape. If I kept telling people to become less breakable, when would I test the strength of my own roots? So I said yes. The week before the event, I prepared like it was a sacred exam. Outfit planning first. I rejected 6 looks before landing on the right one. A deep berry wrap dress, black low heels, sheer tights, soft gold jewelry, and the silk scarf from my father's attic box tied loosely at the handle of my bag like a private blessing. Makeup second. Nothing too heavy. Warm eyes, clean base, controlled glow. Hair third. The wig had to feel secure enough that I could stop thinking about it. But the most important preparation had nothing to do with appearance. I wrote down every reason I had started this journey, and every life fear had told me along the way. Then I wrote what had proven fear wrong. The room at the community center was not huge, maybe 40 chairs, warm lights, a little stage, a microphone that looked far more dangerous than it was. I sat in the back before the event started, hands freezing despite the summer air, and watched people arrive. Some dressed boldly, some casually, some so nervous I recognized myself in their posture instantly. Then I saw my mother walk in. A minute later, my father. He looked uncomfortable in the way men do when entering emotional territory without a map, but he had come. That alone almost ruined my mascara. When my name was called, I thought I might faint, but I walked up anyway. Small steps. Shoulders down. Chin calm. The lessons had entered my bones by then. I took the microphone, looked out at the room, and realized I no longer wanted to sound impressive. I wanted to sound true. So, I told them about the scarf. The box under the bed. The first time I nearly purged everything because of one cruel comment. The lipstick stain. The kitchen confession. The cafe receipt in my shaking hand. The old classmate who expected my shame and found my smile instead. I told them that for a long time I thought crossdressing was the story, but really it was the doorway. The deeper story was permission. Permission to stop treating softness like betrayal. Permission to learn instead of only longing. Permission to build beauty patiently. Permission to exist without becoming a punchline in my own mind. Then I said the sentence that would later be quoted and shared more than anything else I had ever written or spoken. The new him was not a mask. He was the first version of me that stopped running from what made me gentle. The room went silent in that charged, living way that tells you people are not just hearing you, they're placing themselves inside your words. Then someone in the front row started crying. Then someone laughed softly through tears. And I knew, with a certainty so clean it almost hurt, that every humiliating, terrifying, tender step had brought me exactly here. After the event, people lined up to talk. A man in his 50s said he had been hiding for 30 years and did not know whether he was jealous of me or grateful. A student whispered that they had never heard femininity described without mockery before. A woman hugged my mother and told her she wished every child had one moment of being believed like that. My father did not say much in public, but as we walked to the car, he touched the scarf tied to my bag and said, "You spoke like someone who finally isn't afraid of his own heart."
Coming from him, it felt like a crown.
A week later, a clip from that storytelling night spread online. Not millions overnight, not fantasy numbers, but enough to change my life. People shared that line about the new him. They shared the part about tenderness. They shared the moment I described the world, not exploding when I stepped outside. Messages poured in from people I would never meet, telling me they watched to the end because they recognized themselves somewhere in the journey. That mattered most. Not the views, the completion, the staying. People stayed because the story did not tease transformation and then abandon the truth. It kept unfolding. Fear, exposure, guidance, setback, family, public risk, reclamation, community, voice. That is what holds people, not noise, movement. If you are watching me now from your own version of the hidden room, your own box under the bed, your own private folder named something nobody else would understand, I want to tell you what I wish someone had told me sooner. Start smaller than your shame says counts. Learn instead of rushing. Measure instead of guessing. Build one look that feels like home instead of 10 that feel like performance. Let posture help you. Let softness educate you. Do not hand strangers the authority to define your sincerity. Do not confuse one bad photo, one bad wig day, one rude comment, or one clumsy outing with the end of your story. Your first job is not to become flawless. Your first job is to become loyal to yourself. Because that is what changed everything for me. Not better lipstick. Not better lighting. Not even acceptance, though I thank God for the acceptance I found. It was loyalty. The night my brother knocked and I dressed again anyway. The moment I untied the trash bag. The evening I answered yes, when my mother asked if I wanted help. The second I looked an old classmate in the eyes and refused to collapse for his comfort. The choice to keep speaking after I realized my story could become shelter for someone else. These days my room no longer feels like a hiding place. The box is gone. The clothes are in drawers. The wigs are hung properly. The makeup is organized instead of buried. Sometimes my mother still leaves little notes on my vanity mirror, things like blend lower, or this color loves you, or remember your necklace. My father still does not always have the right words, but sometimes when I'm leaving the house dressed, he just nods once like he's watching a person step fully into frame. My brother took the longest to understand, but even he learned that jokes are not harmless when they are built from somebody else's fear. People can change when you stop performing your own disappearance for them. And me? I still get nervous sometimes. I still have bad makeup days, awkward shopping moments, outfits that looked better in my imagination, nights where dysphoria or doubt whispers old insults in a familiar voice. But those voices no longer decide the ending. They are background noise now. What decides the ending is the mirror. The one I used to avoid. The one that once held only fragments and panic. The one that now, on my best days, reflects something so simple it almost feels impossible that it took me this long to reach it.
Peace.
Not because I became someone else. Because I stopped punishing myself for being someone more. So, if you want to know when the new him was finally visible, it was not the night I wore the best outfit. It was not when strangers called me pretty. It was not when the clip went viral. It was the first moment I looked at my reflection and did not demand an explanation before offering love. Everything after that was just the world catching up to what I had already seen. And once you see yourself clearly, truly clearly, fear can still slow you down, but it can never fully hide you again.